Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, Andy Beshear might be getting a look after all. I've reported a few days ago, yesterday, 2 days ago, I don't know, that Andy Beshear did not make the list for vetting for Kamala Harris for that vice presidential spot. Well, it is being reported he is now getting vetted. We'll go into a little bit about that. But Beshear, he's pretty eager. That's the general take from the nation. We'll go into why that might be, because there is a timetable, something that has got to be playing in his back mind, that he needs to get another spot before something goes awry with some of these fake deals he's set up here in Kentucky. Lexington, the city of Lexington, files a lawsuit that makes it pretty clear they do not believe in personal accountability anymore. We'll go into what that lawsuit is. Louisville County clerks, as if it wasn't bad enough, ended up having to go down because of a malware attack. And then finally, first, before I dig into all of that, I'll go ahead and give you my take on something going on at the national level with Joe Biden. I haven't, like I said priorly when I've talked about national politics, I don't typically do so unless I believe I have something to add to the conversation. And in this case, I believe I might have something to add to the conversation, a take I haven't heard anybody else bring up. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into that, please head on over to theandrewshow.com. Hit the contact tab if you want to reach out to the show. I get some messages and emails from listeners all the time, and a lot of the shows you hear actually have to do with some of the emails and things that people have sent me, and I greatly appreciate that. It helps me make the show. So if you have an idea for the show, go ahead and reach out using that contact tab, or you can email us at info@theandrewshow.com. And then also as well, please take a moment to leave a 5-star review on the podcast. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not, but let's go into it. So Joe Biden last night gave his address from the Oval Office, and it was iffy. Now, obviously, I record podcasts. Obviously, I deal with audio a fair amount. And because of that, I picked up on some things some other people didn't. One was Joe Biden. For those of you who listened to it, you may have heard that Joe Biden was talking normal, sounded normal, but in actuality, in real life, if you're right there with him, he would have been talking extremely quietly. And that was obvious to tell because they had the mic. For some reason, they had the lavalier mic like down at his belly button instead of like up at his face. Actually, right now, I'm recording the show on a lavalier mic, and it is just down my shirt. Maybe about 4 or 5 inches away from my chin, down my shirt to pick up the audio. When you watch me do a video episode, you'll see that lavalier mic is also pretty close up to me. But for some reason, they put Joe Biden's mic all the way down, like at his belly button on his suit jacket and not up higher. I don't quite understand why, but they put it down low, and then they cranked up the gain and audio levels to the point that you're hearing like a lot of background noise. You were hearing a lot of buzzing because they've had to crank that up so high. And so that's the first indication. Second, the dude had on a lot of makeup covering his face, and you could listen through his speech, and I think just about every American came away from that with the same question. Who the heck is running our country at this point? Is it Kamala Harris? Has she taken over essentially as president? Because it is clear that Joe Biden isn't doing it anymore, which leads to the question of why doesn't Joe Biden just go ahead and step aside now? In fact, him stepping down for medical reasons would actually help out in the long run, because there are a lot of states, including swing states, that have a lot of rules when it comes to your ability to withdraw from a race. And some of those states, I believe Michigan is one of them, for an example, you cannot withdraw from the race without having a medical issue or death. They do not let you withdraw for surely a political reason. And based on Joe Biden's speech and what we've heard from the White House and just generally what we're hearing from the Democrats is basically Joe Biden stepped aside because he couldn't beat Trump. They haven't cited any kind of medical issues. He hasn't given up the presidency too as well, citing that, well, he just can't do it with his health. It has simply been done due to a political reason. And that will become quite an issue for them in a lot of these states. So why is it that they decided to go ahead and keep Joe Biden in there? If he's one, not really even running the country, and then two, it would also help Kamala Harris out as she's trying to run for this presidential spot, because if he steps down, now she is the current president. It's hard to claim that she's not experienced. That's kind of a little bit of a claim, the DEI vice presidential selection. It's harder to claim that, people didn't vote for her. It's just in general, it's harder. It makes it harder to take her down. Stepping down from the presidency and giving it over to her would help them out. And maybe Joe Biden does that a few months down the road, but I think it's very possible Joe Biden does it for a very basic and simple reason. And that is Joe Biden wants to issue some pretty politically charged pardons. I believe he wants to issue some pardons to his son. He wants to issue some pardons possibly to himself, to his brothers, to his family for a lot of their dirty dealings. And if he issues those pardons now, well, that would be a big political black eye and could end up costing them the presidency in November. So what they're going to go ahead and do is keep him in there. I believe he's going to stay in there until past the election, simply so he can issue some pardons that if they'd been issued before the election, then they would have possibly been what cost them into swing states. Tomorrow, we'll dig into a little bit about some of these, the Kamala Harris. There's some interesting pushes going on nationally as well. Like I said, I only talk about it when I believe I have something to add to the conversation. And in this case, I certainly do. Now, earlier in the week, I talked about Andy Beshear not being on the short list for vetting materials for Kamala Harris. It is being reported now that, in fact, he is being vetted for the vice president spot now. And I will tell you this much, it indicates to me that maybe one or two or three possibly their top picks or a couple of their top picks have already said they don't want to do it. And so they're worried about having enough people to pick. If Andy Beshear ends up as the VP on that ticket, I guarantee you somebody else at some point said no. They're not interested in being a part of that ticket. Now, some of you may be shocked to hear this, but I do actually follow quite a lot of the liberal national politics as well as liberal local politics. In fact, it's funny, if you go onto my Twitter, I don't have a lot of people I'm following on my Twitter. And I sometimes get a hard time about that from some of my other people that do some social media commentary about, hey, you don't follow a whole lot of people. And generally speaking, it's because I like to curate my content based upon what's interesting to me. And I don't want to necessarily follow these people all the time. I just want to see a kind of a matrix of thoughts. And so by not following a lot of people, Twitter just kind of shows me things based upon what I click on, what I'm kind of interested on. And I often will click on liberal posts and kind of read what they're saying because I'm interested in hearing what the other side has to say. And so that ends up with Twitter going ahead and promulgating to me a algorithm ends up delivering me content from the leftist side of things. And I have seen this from several leftist commentators saying that Kamala Harris should not pick Andy Beshear because he is too desperate. He wants it too badly. I've also seen some mixed reactions to how he ended up behaving when it came to on TV and elsewise. When he was giving that national spot, he was a little hit or miss, they said. They weren't too sure he'd necessarily be a great guy. And of course, as always, not being in those swing states, being in an important swing state of any kind, Kentucky's not up for play. It's clearly going to go to Trump, means that, well, maybe somebody else can help out better on the ticket. But Beshear is desperate. I mean, if you look around online right now, you'll be seeing all kinds of leftists and Democrats and liberals in Kentucky tagging Kamala Harris, trying to make a recommendation that they go ahead and pick Andy Beshear. It's like a full court press because Andy Beshear knows he needs to step up to a national office. Andy Beshear does not want to run for the Senate here in Kentucky. He's very, very nervous about that prospect, I do believe, because obviously you could lose and that would hurt your quote unquote legacy. Two, Kentucky has a far better track record of electing Republicans over Democrats, even Democrats who have been in governor type roles, deciding instead to elect the Republicans at the national level for quite some time now. So that makes him uncomfortable, and he doesn't have necessarily that incumbency effect. And it's harder to play the Mr. Rogers, I'll take care of you thing when we're talking about how are you going to actually pass legislation. You're not running for governor, you're running to be a legislator. So Andy Beshear knows his political future, if he wants one, has got to be something on that national stage. And so running for being the VP to Kamala Harris is very desperate for him because it gives him that national name ID, something he can build off of running into a presidential election in 4 years. Of course, if he gets picked on the ticket and wins, then he can go ahead and be the vice president for, 4, potentially 8 years. So, that helps him out as well. But the other thing that Beshear is worried about, and this is why he might be a little bit desperate to go ahead and get this locked up, is because Beshear may not be able to wait till the end of his governorship to be able to make a leap, because so he has another 2027 would be his last year as governor. So 2028 would be the first year he can run. Well, to remind you, a lot of these deals, these electric vehicle deals that he's brokering, these multi-billion-dollar deals that he's spending hundreds of millions of taxpayer funds on, their maturity, where you have to be able to have created X number of jobs or you have to return the money, ends up coming to fruition in 2030. For an example, the Ford SK battery plant, they have till 2030 to technically deliver on the 5,000 jobs they promised. That's quite a while, obviously. That's, 6 years to go ahead and deliver. But what if it doesn't happen? Well, Beshear gets that giant black eye. I mean, may I remind you that Brady Industries, a Bevan program where that was like only $12 million, has followed him around as a black eye, is brought up constantly, talked about, where the government just lost $12 million giving to a private company. For Beshear to have that same situation, but instead with $250 million, would be quite a problem, because we've already given $250 million in cash to Ford for that battery plant. $250 million in cash. And the problem we have here is that if Ford doesn't deliver on the jobs and you try to get the cash back from them, Ford may say, you know what, okay, fine, we'll pull our truck plant out of Louisville then and move it somewhere else, where they'll give us a $250 million incentive to move our truck plant there, and then we'll go ahead and pay you out of the incentives we'll get from elsewhere to pay off our loan, or you can just go ahead and forgive the $250 million and allow us to continue to operate. Ford has the leverage in the situation. And the reason why they're on the turntable, now anybody who listens to the show any length of time knows I hate this deal. I thought it was dumb because electric vehicles, I believe, are too reliant on things like federal government policy, tax incentives, those types of things to become profitable, to become popular. They're too reliant on redoing our infrastructure. Too many things have to go right for that business to be a safe bet. Who's the president matters for that to be a safe bet, because President Trump has said, I'm going to cut off, all this green new scam things. I'm going to cut off a lot of this funding to these electric vehicle situations. And if that's the case, if Trump really stops with the incentives to build electric vehicle chargers across the country and says, no, we're going to build bridges and roads and things, but we're not going to waste that money on electric vehicle chargers, that alone would be a death blow to a lot of this electric vehicle. I mean, they already have a falling demand, and it's very based upon politics. Coupled with that, Ford just had their earnings call. And on their earnings call, they announced last quarter they lost $1.1 billion on their electric vehicle manufacturing. They're losing tens of thousands of dollars per every single electric vehicle they make. It is not a profitable part of their business at this point. That is even after we have the federal government shelling out billions upon billions upon billions of your tax dollars in order to incentivize either the purchasing of electric vehicles by citizens through specialized tax credits, cash handouts to these companies to get them to build the factories to make it work, paying for advancement and grants into battery technology. It is literally, that's after all that spending, and they're still losing over $1 billion a quarter. How long can that go on? On top of that, the Ford CEO said, if we're going to make electric vehicles work, we're going to have to get America to fall in love with small cars again. Well, if that can't happen before 2028, if it looks like this battery park and Blue Oval and all these other pushes that Beshear's made is going to go belly up before 2028 as he's leaving the governorship, it will greatly affect his ability to run for president at the national level because it will be hung around his neck like a stone. We just had these rankings come out ranking Andy Beshear's the second highest approval rating in of a governor. And obviously he's in a Republican state. So, that's pretty high as far as it goes. And certainly him being in a state that's majority Republican, having that second highest approval rating in the country is pretty big. And that's probably a big part of the reason why with that coming out that the Harris campaign decided to go ahead and give Beshear a look. After all, the timing on that is pretty clear. But it just goes to show that will crater because nothing will upset the voters more than if they find out all these successes that Beshear has been peddling. If it actually winds up that, there aren't that many successes at all. In fact, Beshear kind of sucks. Well, then that will really crater his legacy. And it'll certainly hurt him on the national level. Well, moving on here, Lexington has filed a lawsuit that goes ahead and lets you know that they do not believe in personal accountability. The city of Lexington has filed a lawsuit against Hyundai, USA, and Kia Corporation, charging the companies have created a public safety nuisance, Mayor Linda Gordon said. Lexington is one of the many cities nationwide that has sued the two car manufacturers because their vehicles lack anti-theft technology. This is some interesting claims here. I guess what Linda Gordon is saying is that the cars deserved it because they deserve to be stolen because of look what they were wearing. How dare you park on this side of town wearing what you're wearing? What were you expecting? Of course you deserve to be stolen. This entire concept that for some reason, because vehicles are too easy to steal, it is the manufacturer's fault that people steal their vehicles. It's not the fact that you have cities full of criminals. It's Kia and Hyundai's fault. That would be like saying that if somebody breaks into your home and you call the police, their first question to you would be, well, do you have a Rottweiler? No, you don't. Do you have an alarm system? You don't. So somebody broke into your home and you don't have an attack dog or an alarm system? I tell you what, we're not going to respond to that break-in because you should have done more to protect yourself. That's on you. Click. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. And we've seen this from Democrats many a times over. May I remind you, Senator Berg, this past session, actually made a pretty crazy statement, also obfuscating this kind of responsibility, the responsibility around criminals breaking into and stealing cars, and said, you know what, whose fault it is? It's the victim's fault. It's somebody else's fault. It's not the criminals. Listen to what Berg had to say in a committee when they were asked about heightening the punishment for people committing crimes with guns. Take a listen.
If every one of those guns that were stolen out of a car, which is the vast majority of guns on the street right now, are stolen from cars. If we had a law that made you responsible for storing your gun safely so that it could not be stolen out of your car, that it was in a lockbox that was locked in your car and kids could not break in your car and get that gun, I'd say 100%. That is a step in the right direction.
So that was her saying that, well, you know, maybe if we had some sort of law making the victims of people breaking into your car and stealing your gun responsible for locking up their gun because, it's not already locked up when you've literally put it in your car and locked the car. Like you've locked it up. But they're saying, well, you need to double lock it up. You need to lock it up in your car and then put it in a safe and lock it as well. And then maybe it won't be stolen. Then we can hold criminals accountable for committing crimes with guns, because that's what they were talking about there. They're talking about passing laws to enhance the punishment for committing crimes with guns. So we can't pass laws enhancing the punishment to criminals until you, the victim, start double locking up your guns. And until that's a law, until the victims start acting less like victims, well, we can't hold the criminals responsible. It's the same line of thought. And this is exactly why we have cities that are so incredibly crime-ridden, because nobody wants to say that people have personal accountability, and it needs to happen. Here's one more story for you out of Louisville. The county clerks had to actually fully shut down due to a malware attack. Now, those of you who've listened to the show for any length of time know I've talked about the Cavis system wreaking havoc all across Kentucky. And one of the ways it's wreaked havoc is because of these county clerks in Louisville has had to shut down before in order to catch up on their backlog with the Cavis system. Well, now they have a malware attack on that system, leading to even more issues. And it just goes to show, once again, this entire system, the statewide system that Beshear has set up, absolutely sucks. It's absolutely horrible. Well, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We will not be back here tomorrow. I will not have an episode tomorrow. I'm actually going to the lake with some friends. And so I'm just being honest with you all. Going to go fishing, going to do some other things. So I'm not going to do a show for tomorrow. But Monday we will return to discussing a few different things, including one of those things being that, we have been having a discussion about local races in the House. Obviously, I haven't hit upon too many House races this week so far. But next week, we're going to have on Sarah Elizabeth Contrail running for House District 41 out of Louisville, talking to her about why she's running in a race as a Republican where the odds are stacked against her. What does she hope to accomplish? Quite an interesting conversation. I hope you tune in. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you Monday. Hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.